We are inching closer to the MLS playoffs, so let's talk some Major League Soccer, and we're going to do it today with one of the best voices around the league and someone I've had the pleasure of working with before. She is a host and reporter for Apple's MLS Season Pass. Jillian Sakovits joins me now. Jillian, how you doing?
I'm fantastic, Dexter, and even more fantastic to talk to you, so thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here to talk some MLS. And Jillian, as you know, the MLS playoffs, they start on the 25th of October. Cincinnati, they are at the top of the standings in the East. They'll be the top seed. They've been strong all season long. Do you look at them as the team to beat in the postseason? And is there a team that you think could knock them out of the playoffs?
In MLS, the beauty is there's always a team who can knock anyone out of the playoffs on any given day. We've seen teams back, in 2016, I think about the Seattle Sounders that were one of the worst teams in the league in July, and then they go on a magic run to win MLS Cup. So that's what makes it exciting. But then what we saw in the MLS Cup final last year between LAFC and the Philadelphia Union also takes away from some of that parity that we've seen in the league in the past. Those were the top seeds in the East and the West, going head-to-head, going to penalty kicks. So just showing how tight the elite teams can be in MLS. This year, FC Cincinnati has run away with it, winning the Supporters' Shield, which in the rest of the world usually means that you win the league, rather. But in MLS, in true American fashion, we have the regular season and the playoffs. So they are the regular season champions. But as many players around the league will tell me, if you go on to an MLS Cup, nobody really remembers who wins the Supporters' Shield. So their head coach, Pat Noonan, would disagree. He said, it's the best trophy, one of the best trophies you can win. But I think the fans want to see you raise the MLS Cup. So FC Cincinnati, they not only were the Supporters' Shield winners, but they did it with nearly a month left in the season. I think that speaks to how elite they are this year. And then for someone that's sitting at home saying, why should I care about FC Cincinnati? It's a great story. It has to be one of the best expansion stories in, for me, North American sports. 3 straight years of the wooden spoon, worst team in the league, bottom of the table, a handful of wins, 3 straight years of that. Last year, they make the playoffs for the first time, a complete turnaround. And then this year, they're the best team in the league. So it's one of these sports stories, expansion team stories that will be studied. I don't think there's a team in the U.S. who had a worse expansion team start than they did. So to see them here in year 5 is fantastic. As for who can beat them, anyone can beat them. But if I had to put my money on maybe like someone in the Eastern Conference bracket that could start to creep in, Orlando City. I don't know, that's a team that a lot of NYC and Red Bull fans will know well. They picked up 6 points, this past week, beating both of their teams. They've been right up there with Cincinnati with scoring. They had a hot start. They were a favorite. Then they cooled off during the year, and now they've just been fantastic. So maybe keep your eyes on that.
All right, keep your eyes on them as a team that could knock off Cincinnati. And just as a follow-up with Cincinnati, in your eyes, is Luciano Acosta. Do you look at him as the favorite for MVP?
The MVP conversation, no matter what sport, is fascinating because it's who's taken the league by storm and who means the most to their team. FC Cincinnati has an entire roster of really good players. But for me, Acosta, with his goal contributions and everything that he brings, has been the most exciting player in the league. Now, if you look at teams who relied on one player, you look at like a Christian Benteke and how much DC United just got knocked out of the playoffs, Wayne Rooney leaving, but he meant everything to them. Acosta means everything to MLS. So for me, he's the league MVP. Who's the team MVP is an interesting one. I think guys like Denny Bwanga with LAFC. LAFC is the reigning champions, and they would at times this year have not looked like the reigning champions, and I don't even think they'd be in the conversation if it was without Denny Bwanga. And then Thiago Almada went to World Cup, won it with Lionel Messi in Argentina, playing for Atlanta United. He'll be in the conversation too. But Lucho Acosta, based on what Cincinnati has done and who he is, he's going to be, for me, the guy to beat.
All right.
And also an Argentine.
Yeah. Also an Argentine, too, as well. Yes, got to mention that as well, too. Playing in the World Cup, also a guy you got to mention as well. Out West, I want to talk to you about Out West, Jillian, because St. Louis FC, they lead the defending champions, LAFC, by 5 points in the standings. Of those 2 clubs out West, you talked about LAFC not looking like defending champs at times this year. Who do you think is playing the best right now on the pitch as they head to the postseason?
Who has played the best all season would be the top seed in the West in St. Louis City, an expansion team that nobody had maybe even making the playoffs, but they have found a way to bring in little bits and pieces. It has to be some of the best scouting, some of the best roster building we've ever seen in Major League Soccer. A designated player, goalkeeper in Roman Berkey, who comes from the likes of Dortmund and the Bundesliga and the Swiss League. So that's been fascinating to watch because everyone kind of counted them out. And St. Louis is a soccer hotbed. For many, it's, Soccer USA. So St. Louis City in the West is the team to beat. And LAFC this year has not looked like themselves. They're the reigning champions. We all know in any sport how hard it is to repeat, but it's especially hard in MLS due to just the parity in the league, 29 teams, roster building caps, designated player rules, all of that. But more than anything with LAFC, I think something that their manager, Steve Cherundolo, would talk about is the fact that they have had to play with all of these competitions, with Leagues Cup, CONCACAF Champions League, everything that they've had going on that you earn by being the reigning champions, playing in the Campeones Cup. Well, they're already at 45 plus games played, and they haven't even started the playoffs. Last year when they won MLS Cup, that MLS Cup final was game number 40. So they've just been playing. And you know what? Good teams get hot at the right time. So I wouldn't rule LAFC out, but absolutely St. Louis City. This is a team with 16 players who have scored goals. They're just getting contributions from everyone. When someone gets hurt, when their leading scorer gets hurt, someone else steps up. It's kind of a team, if you're looking for someone to root for, they're the team that is easy to root for.
All right, there you go with St. Louis, and we'll see if LAFC can get hot as the playoffs start. Let's talk about the New York teams here, Jillian. The Red Bulls,
okay.
They looked buried last month. Now they're making a late season playoff push. NYCFC, they just suffered a tough loss to DC United that hurt their postseason chances. Which of these two clubs do you think will make the postseason, or will both be on the outside looking in?
So 2 spots remain. It will be very difficult for it to be the New York Red Bulls and New York City FC, but it can absolutely be one or the other. But if someone is more poised to do so right now, it's the New York Red Bulls. And that's on October 21st. And they could also play spoiler for a number of teams, but they're coming off of good wins. They beat Cincinnati. They beat Toronto, who's already eliminated. Cincinnati obviously had already clinched the top spot. So MLS Cup playoffs are all about getting hot, getting lucky at the right time. And the New York Red Bulls, for me, are the team most poised to make a run. And as for New York City, they could do it, but I think it's going to be just much, much more difficult for them. They're going up against they went up against a completely DC United team who didn't have a lot to play for. They'd have to jump 4 teams on decision day to do it. So it can happen. It's just going to be more difficult. And for New York City fans, it's been a hard year. I think that there was a lot of spots in the roster that needed to be managed and dealt with, and New York City tried, and they go back and they get one of the best number 10s in the league, former number 10s in the league in Maxi Morales. He plays a few games and he gets hurt. So they tried to replace players and get guys back, but it was just too little too late, I think, for New York City this year.
Yeah, tough year for them. They got off to a very rough start, and seems like that will have hurt them down the stretch. They need a lot of help on decision day to get in. Jillian, it's also award season. Voting is opened for MLS awards. What do you think is the most intriguing regular season award to be decided?
So typically I wouldn't say MVP, but I think this year, based on what I just discussed, is it who means the most to their team, or is it who's been the most impressive in the league? Denny Bouanga, Thiago Almada, Luciano Acosta. So it's the MVP conversation, and then of course throw Lionel Messi in there, which started a lot of controversy. Carlos Gil, of course, of the New England Revolution as well. But Lionel Messi of Inter Miami, somebody who only played a handful of league games for Miami, 200 something minutes. He came in the middle of the summer, and yes, has he been, for all these other reasons, rock star, league growth, league recognition, valuable? Absolutely. But has he been the team MVP in the way that Luciano Acosta has since February, it's difficult. So I know it started quite the controversy on Twitter and social media about if Lionel Messi should even be in the voting. But that to me is why it's also so exciting. There was a one-off tournament during the summer called Leagues Cup where MLS teams went head-to-head with Liga MX, basically to see who's the best team on the continent, who's the best team in North America. It was World Cup style, first of its kind. It was fascinating. Lionel Messi, Inter Miami, won that. So yes, Lionel Messi was the MVP of this 1 month summer tournament Leagues Cup. But can you say he's the team MVP? He's made the guys better around him in the 2 months he's been there. Unfortunately, had a little bit of a knock before he reported for Argentina. But I think that you had Lionel Messi in there. That has to be the conversation, right?
Yeah, no, it's got to be. It's a fascinating conversation, what he did in the Leagues Cup, because he was fantastic there, lifted Inter Miami. We saw how that captivated a lot of folks who weren't watching the MLS to start watching, which was a good thing. That is Jillian Sakovits. Great job, as always, covering the MLS. She's a host and reporter for Apple's MLS Season Pass. You can watch all MLS games on Apple TV+. Go check that out. Jillian, good to see you again. It had been a while. Keep up the great work. We'll talk again soon.
You too, Dexter. Thanks for having me.